Welcome to this edition of Silver Sneakers Boom Muscle. I'm continuing a series of videos of a training regimen as I'm using to prepare to engage in the activity of powerlifting. Credit to this book written by Robert Schuller, Powerlifting Over 50, Mastering the Skills for an Empowered Body and Life. Many of the routines, information, and suggestions come directly from this book. I would highly recommend it if you are interested in engaging in this activity, or in general just getting better and stronger at the three lifts that are a function of powerlifting: the squat, bench press, and deadlift. In powerlifting, there's a number of facets that separate it from, let's say, traditional strength training, resistance exercise, high intensity exercise. First of all is balance. When you're moving heavy weights, you have to engage all of your muscles and maintain a very strong sense of balance. So we need to work on our balance, flexibility, particularly in the hips, knees, and shoulders, and the ability to generate power, which is a function of force and speed. So while I've spent years doing traditional resistance training, I've never really focused on these aspects. 3 weeks into this process, I recognize I have some deficiencies that I need to work on. I'm going to demonstrate some of that and some of the techniques I'm using to improve those. Just to reiterate, powerlifting is a high intensity activity. You want to make sure that you've been cleared by your medical provider to engage in such an activity. On a heavy lift, it can raise your blood pressure. There is some risk to your joints, muscles, and tendons. It can cause tears, other problems. So you want to be well warmed up. You want to recognize your limitations. And while I think you should push yourself a bit, you don't want to overdo it. For example, I once tried to do a really heavy bench press when must have been 30 years ago, tore my pectoral muscle off of my humerus, got a black and blue, covered half of my chest, and it was a very painful lesson. I assume that it's scarred down, so I still have some strength, although I can see a deficit in that muscle. So I'll never get it back. Just to start off with the warm-up, if you follow me before, my favorite warm-up is to take a disinfectant spray bottle and some rags, go through each of the bathroom, restrooms, clean the toilets and the sinks. It's a very functional warm-up, requires some deep squatting and that. And I started doing this when COVID reopened the facilities, but we were worried about spread of that disease on surfaces. Well, this year there is some COVID back, and there's a really bad influenza where the vaccine is maybe only partially effective. So while neither of those is primarily due to surface contact, you never know what is on those. And I find if I clean them before I actually need to use them during my workout, and I forget my spray bottle, I know that it's already been cleaned, at least for me. So palms up backwards and forwards. So having gone through 7 decades of life and lifting weights and all that for many years, I know I have some muscle imbalances and some deficits, things I want to work on so that I have good range of motion, I can generate power and stability. Let me start by grabbing this wooden pole. So for the 3 lifts in the power lifting activity, it's squat, bench press, and deadlift. Well, I know my bench and deadlift are going to be okay. I have things to work on. Squats, a significant problem for me is I lack a lot of mobility in my shoulders. So I have this wooden pole, which I try and use to help me stretch out my shoulders. Ideally, the squat bar should be on your trapezius muscle and a little bit below the bone on your shoulder blade called the spinous process, or the spinous process of your lower cervical vertebrae, and the squat process on the shoulder blade, so below the supraspinatus muscle. So if you can see, if I wheel this down, I can just barely get it there on the one side, the other side. Okay, so now my hands are way out. Over time I have to try and bring my elbows in, and that's going to take some work. So start off with just some box squats with the pole. At the start of exercise, you want to avoid too much static stretching. Use dynamic stretching, which for the most part involves movement. So some of that was static, trying to get my shoulders open. A more dynamic stretch is I can take the bar, put it on the outside of my arm, and do some stretches. This is going to be an external rotation. I've given myself 6 months to get in shape to try and compete in a powerlifting event. I set it as a goal. I think it's important to have goals. In Mr. Schuler's book, he goes through several, what you call a macro cycle, to prepare for that. And what I'm going to work on in the rest of this video is the first part of his starting macro cycle for these power lifts. He recommends exercising 4 days a week, 1 day each week devoted to the separate activities of squat, bench press, deadlift, with some conditioning and accessory activities on those days, and 3 days of relative rest and recovery. For those recovery days, you can do an activity like a walk or a stationary bicycle, but you want to keep your heart rate in that zone 2, where you can talk effectively and allow for your muscles to recover and to allow to reduce inflammation brought on by those heavier lifting days. To continue on this workout, balance is a very important part of generalized fitness, and especially important in powerlifting on your squat and your deadlift, to be able to engage your core and all your muscles. So I'm going to start with just standing on one foot. Another activity to do during your rest days would be something like a Silver Sneakers stability program, yoga, energy. I've decided that I'll post videos on all these different Silver Sneakers formats in the coming weeks. And let's bring our knee out to the side. As I'm going through these balance exercises, you want to engage your core, your back, you can progress these by going to a squishy pad, making it unstable. You can always touch a foot down if you need to. Focus on how your core is engaged, trying to maintain balance. Balance is a very important component in preventing falls, along with muscle strength. You can always progress these even more by closing your eyes during the activity. So I'm going to close my eyes now. It's much harder to do with your eyes closed. Some people recommend working on this one leg balance, let's say when you brush your teeth, so twice a day while you're brushing, try and stand on one leg, the other leg, with the goal of trying to be able to hold that one leg balance with some distraction, like brushing your teeth, for about 30 seconds. One accessory exercise Mr. Schuler recommends is called a wall squat. Against a flat surface. This one has about a 6-inch sticking out thing at the bottom. Ideally, you want to be able to put your foot right against the wall. I know that at this point I'm not able to do that and get anywhere close. So with my feet wide apart, the idea is to try and keep my shins vertical, parallel to the wall. Get my head close to the wall. In this case, since we have this thing at the bottom, I'll put my hands up and put my head against my hands, and then see if I can slide my hand down the wall and maintain that upright posture. The idea is to try and get my thighs and my hips below my knees, so beyond parallel to the floor with the thighs. In this activity, you can also practice your breathing. So you take in a deep, good breath at the start, low into your abdomen, brace, engage all your core muscles, glutes, and hold your breath till we come back up. This is different than many lifting techniques where you exhale on exertion. In this bracing, where we're training our body to brace under a very heavy load, you want to hold that breath, which is part of bracing, until the very end. Let's do one more. Lost my balance on that one. Another assessment I like to do periodically is to see how my legs and my muscles and my legs are balanced. Last year I tore one of my adductors on the inside of my left leg. Feel like it's never fully healed, so I expect I'm probably a little bit weaker on that side, and so to counteract that, I'm working on trying to get that side specifically stronger by doing split squats and one leg presses. So on this machine, let me start with a very light weight. See how I do with one leg at a time. legs. I find that a good warm-up exercise, and it gives me a sense of where I am as far as recovering from that injury. Moving on to our squat exercises. Here are, in a previous video, I've discussed several of machines available in a facility like this to increase leg strength, like a press, this belt squat machine, or this padded squat machine, hack squat machine. While these can increase strength in your legs, I don't think it really correlates with improvement in the squat itself. The squat is a very athletic move. It requires balance, coordination, flexibility, the ability to generate power and strength, and it is susceptible to causing injuries if you aren't focused, or if you're missing particular strength in certain accessory muscles. So when you come to the gym to do a squat, first thing you need to do is check your ego at the door and start with weights that are light enough so that you can do perfect form without injury. So I'm starting with just the 45-pound bar. Many experts recommend not using a pad. The reason I have one on there is until I can improve the flexibility in my shoulders, I can't get the bar sufficiently low to avoid it running right across my C7 cervical vertebral process, which is the one that sticks out the most in the upper back, or across the spines of the scapula, which is, again, it's bone underlying the skin without really anything over it. So until I can get it down a little bit lower to where it's resting on the trapezius, rhomboids, and rear delts, I'm going to use a pad. As I mentioned, the squat is a very athletic move and therefore requires a number of factors to do it correctly. Again, you have to, it's a full body exercise, so you want to have every muscle in your body contracted. You want to brace, which means taking in a deep breath, contracting your core, and holding that during the descent, and then the ascension. You want to extend with power. You have to be cognizant of balance. If you lean forward, it puts a tremendous strain on your back. That's why I showed previously the wall squat, where you're facing the wall, trying to get that flexibility in your hips and ankles to be able to keep the bar basically in a very vertical position without bending forward, which is likely to increase your risk for injury. So I'm going to start off, attempt to do 5 repetitions, trying to get down to where the bar, my thighs are below my knees or at least parallel to the floor. Trying to be aware of all the different factors in this lift. Pad didn't do me much good, so Going to take a couple minutes rest. Going to repeat that without increasing the weight. Again, just working on the fundamentals of the squat. For my second set, I'm going to attempt again to go for 5 repetitions, working on all those factors of form, balance, bracing, posture, power, and flexibility. As you recognize that powerlifting is an athletic event, it's important to strengthen and work on all the components of athleticism. So Mr. Schuler has a whole list of conditioning activities to incorporate into your routine. He first prioritizes the major lift, like the squat, bench press, deadlift. Generally separated on different days of the week, and particularly as you start progressing and getting heavier, but allowing for sufficient rest between each of those heavy lifts. So for the conditioning, one to start off with is our kettlebell swing. I'm going to shoot for 10 repetitions. Again, my feet a little bit more than shoulder width apart. I'm going to slide the kettlebell back between my legs. Knees slightly bent, and the power comes from bringing your hips forward. Raising the arms up about parallel to the floor or a little higher. There really isn't much work done with the shoulders or the arms. But basically, as you pop the kettlebell forward with your hips, the momentum brings it up, and your arms are just there to guide it. A few seconds rest, and we'll go through another cycle. And again, pop it up. Take a little break, get a drink of water, and we'll move on to kettlebell snatch. Depending on the amount of time you spend between each exercise, you can consider these just a conditioning exercise, or if there's minimal rest, action intervals. You'll find, at least for me, doing these kettlebell exercises gets me a bit out of breath. So for the snatch, start the same. I'm doing it one arm. You can do a kettlebell in each arm. Again, back through the legs, and then you swing the kettlebell up in front of your body, overhead, and try and catch it at the top. Sometimes it'll have a tendency to swing backwards. To protect your forearm from getting hit by the kettlebell, you want to grip tight and bring your arm forward as you ease into that. Sometimes even bounce down a little bit in your knees. To bring the weight down, you want it to drop basically straight in front of you, and again back between the legs. So here we go. for the snatch, I very much prefer to grip hard at the top so that it ends up inverted but not sliding backwards, hitting my forearm, which to me just feels clumsy. So might need to work on grip strength. It's a good exercise for that. Other arm. One conditioning drill I like to do is a combination of an overhead press and a waiter's walk. So similar to a farmer's walk, carrying a weight and walking, but this time we lift the weight over our head and go for a little walk. You can hold the weight steady or do up and down presses with it. Up and walk. Even with a fairly light kettlebell or dumbbell, this is quite a challenging move. Engaging your whole core so that you don't tip side to side, and other arm and another walk. Moving on, another important conditioning or accessory exercise is a lat pull, pull up, or row. Strengthening the upper body, the posterior, particularly your trapezius, latissimus dorsi, and those other supporting muscles. Conditioning exercise to help with the bench press is the fly. I like to do these on a seated machine, set fairly far back, working both on flexibility in my shoulders and chest muscles, as well as concentrating on those muscles to help with the lift. Some people will add a exercise like a shrug, although I find with the deadlift that I do basically a shrug as I'm doing the deadlift. So I don't want to overdo that activity, although it is important to work on grip strength, which you can do by squeezing a ball or some other relatively soft object, or doing a farmer's walk like we've demonstrated before. Just carrying a modest weight like a 45-pound plate and walking back and forth. One final accessory exercise for this tape is to work on my rear delts. For me, this is particularly important because my rotator cuff being shot on both sides, I'm trying to increase the strength in my muscles to take over the functions of the rotator cuff, since I'm beyond the surgery. So take a band and first hold it out like arms sort of straight in front of the chest and pull side to side. Then you can add a diagonal. Call this a star pattern. So we're going to finish this session with some static stretching, particularly working on my shoulders to improve that range of motion, to make getting the bar low enough on my upper back to where it's below the C7 spinous process and off of the bony process of the scapula. Hope you enjoyed this, and I'll follow it up with additional workouts as I'm progressing in this new activity adventure of mine in powerlifting.